Hello everybody, my name is Altcoin Connoisseur. Welcome back. And in today's episode, I'm going to be providing Crypto Hopium, why the pain is almost over, if not already over, and why you should be bullish on crypto and altcoins despite the news, the headlines, everyone around you telling you that it's bearish. So if that sounds very interesting to you, like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into it. So right here, I'm on the lizard people chart. We can see here that in my previous videos, I have called for a double bottom type of scenario that will form as this liquidity was being hunted by the lizard people. I like to refer to this liquidation heat map as the lizard people chart. So we can see here, we cleared out all this liquidity beneath. I am on the 1 year, by the way. And you can see the majority of the liquidity rests above us. So when you look at thick bands of liquidity, you might be able to see key resistance and support points, right? So what is resistance and support going forward? So let's take a look at this thick band right here. We might hop up to around, let's go 83, right? Maybe back down a little bit, up to this thick band of 100, maybe back down a little bit, and then our final resistance is going to be right at this all-time high, and that's weird how that works. And we might struggle to get a little bit through there and then pop off through there. That is a liquidation heat map on Bitcoin. Let's go to Ethereum real quick. We can see on the 24-hour, just to evidence the importance of the lizard people chart, you can see here that Ethereum has popped up extremely quickly in order to grab this area of liquidity right up here, this thick yellow band. And that's something that you will see if you keep an eye on the liquidity heat map over and over again. Let's zoom out and go a little bit more long term here. Let's go to, let's say, for example, the 1 month. We can see here the king of altcoins, Ethereum. Virtually all the liquidity is above us. There's really no incentive to go much lower. Could it? It's possible, but everything right here, the thickest bands of liquidity are above us. So we might see a push to this level right here around 1900, maybe retrace, maybe go to 2000, $105 million there. That's very nice. Retrace a little bit and then keep scaling up these areas. So that sounds, if you just look at this, it seems like Ethereum is going up and it seems like we're pretty close to the bottom. Could we again get some little wick down here to clear this stuff out? Yeah, but it's not super entertaining. Sometimes the lizard people will leave liquidity around for a little bit if there isn't that much of it, right? There's not too much incentive at this point to go down any further. So let's go ahead and take a look at some metrics that I've looked up to determine if we are at a place where we could possibly reverse the course for crypto in general. So what we're looking at right here is, this is on CoinGlass. This is Bitcoin total supply and loss. And what you can see here is that we've just recently poked through, let's see if we can get this perfectly, areas of supply and loss that have corresponded to recent previous bear markets. So we can see here that in February of 2019, Bitcoin supply was in an extreme loss, and then only a month or so later, we started an upward expansionary move. We can see once again in the bear market, or not the bear market, but just simply a downward move. I think people throw around the term bear market a little bit too much. It's just simply a downward move. We can see in March of 2020, once again, we had a tremendous supply and loss exceeding 10 million. And then shortly preceding that, a little bit over a month later, we started expanding upwards. When we look at our biggest supply and loss in November of 2022, it took from November to, I mean, it's so tight, you can barely even see it, early January to start experiencing upward movement. And then once again, we have supply and loss over 10 million. Could it be a situation in which we might spend anywhere from a few weeks to a month in this consolidative period before we go up? Maybe do we have some sort of double or triple tap like we had in this area, Totally possible. But needless to say, we've met this metric for the bottom of a bear market, and the likely move up from here would be up. I've noticed on X, I've noticed on YouTube that many analysts are calling for 30K Bitcoin or 40K Bitcoin or some even less. That would put the supply and loss in an area that we've never seen before, probably all the way up here. So that really wouldn't make much sense from an on-chain analytics perspective. Let's go ahead and look at Bitcoin long-term holder supply. So what's really interesting about this chart, you can see as the price starts to go up, this is in the 2017 cycle, and we get closer to a euphoric period, the long-term holders sell. The long-term holders are a good population to watch because they're usually a little bit more on the ball than the majority of the cryptocurrency market, right? They're more on the ball than your average retail investor is, 100%. So we can see here, we start our parabolic move and they sense that Bitcoin is nearing its peak, and then the long-term holders dip. And then they accumulate in these areas of the bottom of the bear market, or simply just down periods where nothing else really exciting is going on. And then what do we see here? In October of 2020, Bitcoin starts to go up parabolically, and then the long-term holders sell off. Then once again, they accumulate in bear market territory. And what's really interesting about this cycle is that we have some periods where Bitcoin is seemingly going sideways, and then long-term holders are accumulating more, and then they're actually dumping into weakness, which is something that's very unique for Bitcoin long-term holders. That tells me the cycle isn't over. We're dumping into weakness, and yet we're getting a little bit more weak here. And look at that. Bitcoin long-term holders, they're holding more Bitcoin than they ever have in the history of Bitcoin. So this is a confluence that says, at least to me, that the upward movement is ahead of us, especially with the long-term holders, which are typically the smartest investors in the space, having the most Bitcoin at this current time than they have in any other point in history. And there's been no dip during this accumulation phase. It only continues to go up. Let's take a look at some other things here. So we have Bitcoin supply and profit. So to contrast Bitcoin supply and loss, we see Bitcoin supply and profit. And if I were to draw a trend line here, it would look like a up and to the right curvature, where I wish I could draw this on a graph, but it's up and to the right, and it looks like that. And if we were to take the top portion, same thing. We can see here with this curved imaginary trend line, we are near this bottom. Could we maybe hang out a little bit? Could we maybe do a thing where we dip back below into some areas, or maybe this does a bottom, or maybe we simply go sideways for a bit and these lines get thicker? Very possible. But when I look at this in confluence with long-term holder supply going up, in confluence with Bitcoin supply and total loss, price-wise, I feel like we are pretty close to where we need to be to say that this is a bottom. I'm going to give you one more piece of confluence right here that illustrates how close we are to this exact bottom. So this is Bitcoin's realized price. Now, I looked this up earlier, but in all honesty, I don't remember why this is super important. But what matters is that during each bearish period, you at least kiss or you dip below this period for a little bit. You can see here in all the way back in 2015, we dipped below realized price. Back in 2018, 2019, we briefly dipped below the realized price. In 2020, during the COVID pandemic, we briefly dipped below this price. And finally, again, in 2022, we briefly dipped below this price. We can see here that we are approaching this price right now. So maybe this is a situation where we just kiss it, or maybe we hang out there, or maybe we don't get there at all. I'm not entirely sure. But you can see here that the realized price on the far right edge is, if I can get there, it's around $53,000 plus. So once again, I want to reiterate that these people who are calling for much low targets must be unfamiliar with this. At the very most, we kiss it, or we maybe dip below it for a bit and then shoot back up. In all honesty, in my opinion, I believe that simply because we had a sort of muted and non-euphoric top, there's a high probability that we maybe just kiss it, or we don't even touch it at all and then continue up from there. So far we have liquidity indicating, oh, that's Ethereum, my bad. Liquidity, nothing much below us at all, everything to the upside. In all likelihood, going to go up. We have Ethereum liquidity too, king of altcoins. Looks even better, right? We go to supply and loss, meeting with all-time low supply and loss during bear markets, and specifically bear market bottoms. We have long-term holders accumulating. We have supply and profit near this curvature trend line. If I were to draw imaginarily, that works, near the bottom. And then finally, we have Bitcoin near its realized price. So let's take a look at another chart. So one thing that I wanted to bring up here is that during each bear market or downward movement, Bitcoin likes to dip a little bit below its previous all-time high. So, for example, when we look at the 2017 high, in 2022, before this previous bull run, it dipped around 22%. If we look at this all-time high from 2021, the current price has dipped below that by around 12.36% approximately. These lines aren't perfect, but they're a good reference point. This indicates to me, with diminishing returns and both diminishing losses, that we are probably near a bottom. I think interestingly too, if I move these out, oh no, I don't want that. You go away. Get out of here. I'm just gonna go ahead and delete that guy. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these out of the way right here. So one thing that I want to take note of is double bottoms. So we can see here in June of 22, we set a local low. And then once again, in November of 22, we set a local low. What preceded this? Upward movement. Let's take a look here. I can use this candle, or this wick, shall I say. In May of 2024, we set a local bottom. We set a slightly further local bottom in August of 24. Upward movement. Here again, we set a local low in February, and we set a slightly lower low in June. That's probably the flush out that we need to expand upward. You'll notice these other lines on the graph. So we have the S&P 500 and we have gold. So let's go ahead and start off with the S&P 500. So many people have claimed that we have decoupled from the S&P 500 and therefore crypto is dead and Bitcoin is dead. But we notice throughout history, particularly in low periods, we have decoupled from the S&P 500 several times before. Down here from July, or shall I say June of 2022, until the the bull market got going profoundly, we were below the S&P 500. We started to struggle from March of 24 to September or October of 24, stayed behind the S&P 500 in terms of performance, shot above it. This period has been the longest, or not necessarily the longest, but shall I say, the biggest divergence that we've seen from the S&P 500 in quite a long time, or shall I say ever. With that being said, do you think it's realistic that we just continue to diverge from the S&P 500, or is this a spring that is going to catapult us up and closer to, and then eventually through the performance of the S&P 500? Something to consider. If you give no bearing to history whatsoever and you say, oh, hey, this time is different, Bitcoin is a piece of shit and it's going down forever, and then the S&P 500 is the best, then you're ignoring the entire history of the cryptocurrency market. Let's take a look at gold for a second as well. So we can see here throughout time, gold and crypto have been fairly aligned throughout its history. And we tend to see Bitcoin and crypto perform during gold downturns. So for example, if we look at gold in 2020, made a peak, started a dip. What do we know? Bitcoin and crypto go up versus gold. Crypto drops down. Gold starts its run. And then only when we see gold cool off again, do we actually see crypto start to reverse and then actually shoot past gold. What are we seeing right now? We're seeing gold start to go down heavily. What probably comes next, given that we have this period of wide divergence between the S&P 500 and Bitcoin's performance, given that we have this double bottom structure? See, double bottom, explosion, bottom, bottom. You could even go bottom, bottom, explosion, bottom, bottom, once again, probably explosion, well past the performance of gold and the S&P 500. Just because that it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that it won't happen soon in the future. Let's take a look at this. So this is a confluence that I believe altcoins will be going up soon. So this is Bitcoin dominance. And for the past several years, Bitcoin dominance has been up and to the right. We can see here that we have both some fibs, and we also have the Bollinger Band. So if you aren't familiar with the Bollinger Band, basically there are three lines on the chart. There is a simple moving average. There is an above line right here. That's the red line. It is 2 standard deviations above the simple moving average. And then we have this green line, which is low, which is 2 standard deviations below the simple moving average. If you don't know what that means, in essence, we're saying, oh, hey, something is cheap compared to the way that it's moving, and something is expensive compared to the way that it's been trending, right? And we can see here that we have been losing support of this line, and it looks like we are starting to go down to the lower end of the Bollinger Band. Additionally, we can see that we're actually losing the 0.236 pretty substantially. So I would believe that the next move for Bitcoin dominance would be to come down to this level right here, the 0.382, at around, let's say, 55%, before possibly coming back up and then making a further move down. So what is that going to do for altcoins? Probably quite a bit. Let's go ahead and take a look at others. So I just have a simple graphic here of others. Hold on, I have one that's marked up a little bit more. All right, here we go. So we have a bunch of lines going on here, and I want to draw some contrast to these lines compared to macroeconomic conditions. So you can see here the blue line is the copper to gold ratio. When the copper to gold ratio drops, that is indicative of safety conditions, economic contraction, and people wanting to flee towards more safety assets such as bonds, such as gold, things of that nature. When copper to gold goes up, we can see that a more risk-on sentiment occurs. So people are going to put their money into things like the Russell 2000, things like tech stocks, and things like crypto. And we can see a pretty clear correlation between the copper to gold ratio and crypto performance, particularly in others. So if we go back to the 2017 cycle, copper to gold ratio is high. Crypto is performing very well. Drops, crypto goes down, starts to go back up. Massive copper to gold ratio spike around the 2021 peak. copper to gold goes down. And you know what's really interesting here? For all the people who say that crypto is dead, it's pretty incredible that others has held up incredibly well despite the massive drop in the copper to gold ratio, because previously we haven't seen others surpass the copper to gold ratio, but it has this time. And then what do we see right here? We see copper to gold ratio going up, right? Not only that, we do sort of see a double bottom structure. And before you go up, you do see a lot of wicks to the downside. So wick to the downside, wick to the downside, explosion. Oh, what do you know? A slightly higher high with that wick. What do we have here? Wick low, slightly higher wick low. What would probabilistically come next with the copper to gold ratio going up as it is? Probably an explosion. Another piece of confluence is the ISM PMI. So the ISM PMI is essentially a survey that measures economic activity in the U.S. And along with the copper to gold ratio, we can see that it closely follows or maybe sets the precedent for upward expansion in cryptocurrencies. So once again, ISM PMI is high, crypto is doing very well. It dips, crypto is struggling, goes up again drastically in 2021. Crypto is at its peak, drops, goes to its bear market lows, and then a long consolidation in here. Crypto showing strength in this period, by the way. And then what are we seeing? ISM PMI peaking, or not peaking, but at least going up. So it's just more so that crypto isn't struggling. And in fact, we've just recently shown strength. It's more so that this is maybe leading, that copper to gold is leading and ISM is leading, and we just haven't quite gotten there yet. Let's take a look at another graphic. So this is others. I have a fib retracement. I always do that every single video. I call it retracement. Whatever. I mean, that's what the TISM does, right? And we have the Bollinger Band. So what we can see here is that the current crypto prices are very much near the bottom of the Bollinger Band. And this is on the monthly, by the way, meaning that the prices of altcoins on aggregate, this is others, are very low compared to their moving averages. When have we also seen that? Oh, hey, we've seen this back in December of 22. Much closer to the lower edge of the band than the upper edge of the band. What happened next? Massive explosion going past the Bollinger Band. Look at 2020, a touch of the lower Bollinger Band, insane explosion upward. What do we see here? We see a wick past the Bollinger Band, and we see price action near this bottom of this band. What is more likely, that we just continue to go down and down and down, or maybe we retest the middle of the band, dip a little bit, retest the 0.618 and then expand higher to the Bollinger Band or perhaps past it? Up for you to decide. Look at history. So let's take a look at some other things here. This is the stablecoin dominance. So a prominent theory that I've heard is that crypto can't go up because stablecoin dominance continues to rise. And let's take a look at this Bollinger Band here. What do you think when you look at this? Is this overextended? Yes. It's more than 2 standard deviations away from the simple moving average. What is the likely play? Well, let's take a look. Last time we got overextended from the or not the last time, but in November of 2025, we got extended from the Bollinger Band average. We retraced closer to the mean. We did it again in February of this year. We retraced close back to the mean. Are you bullish on this far above the Bollinger Band? I'm not. Probably coming back down. And let's just say, just for shits and gigs, that the stablecoin dominance is going to continue to go up. Might there be a reason as to why outside of what is normally thought, meaning that stablecoin dominance goes up, that means crypto goes down? Well, there might be a reason. Look at the stablecoin dominance over time. It has been fairly parabolic. I might unveil my tinfoil hat conspiracy, but the US government has a massive incentive to have stablecoin market cap go up significantly. Why? Because if globally people adopt crypto from various different countries, they can hold US dollars in USDC and USDT. Are US dollars good? If you're into crypto, you are thinking to yourself, they are obviously not. With that being said, could it be better than a currency than, let's say, for example, Zimbabwe? Or could it be safer than a currency from Colombia? Could it be more stable? Could it be less inflationary than the US dollar? Absolutely. I feel like the US government is going to use stable coins to try to repay a lot of their debt. So when we go back to stablecoin dominance and everyone's freaking out about the fact that it's going to go up, and quite frankly, it doesn't hang out. Look at it historically. It doesn't hang out above the Bollinger Band for long on the upper side. I think it's more so the case that they want to have people globally holding US dollars. And I think that is one of the reasons why that crypto has been, shall I say, artificially suppressed compared to other assets. They want to keep the price of crypto as low as possible for as long as possible so that they can execute their plan. Again, that's my conspiracy theory. You like it or you hate it. I think it holds weight. Also, too, think about this. If you are a smart money investor and you have a lot of capital, are you going to invest in something that has already ran up significantly? Are you going to possibly top blast the S&P 500? I don't know what it's going to do. It could continue up. I'm not sure. Are you going to top blast gold here? Or are you going to look for things that have had overall relative strength but are undervalued? My opinion would be that they would look for things that are currently undervalued. You don't want to buy something that's already made its run and then you're late to the party and then you just get dumped on. That's what retail does. People were lining up for gold in physical gold shops as it was up here, as it was at its peak. I remember I talked about investments one time. I'm a health teacher, and the conversation came up, and I was teaching with a boomer, and around this time, it was the start of the second semester. It was around February. Where's February? Oh, yeah. I mean, it's right around its peak. And I brought up the fact that I'm not a big fan of gold, and I think that crypto is probably the better investment at the time. And then the boomer said, yeah, definitely invest in gold. Well, how has that worked out? Tell me, right? Now, granted, crypto hasn't worked out either, but I believe gold has significantly more downside, maybe something like this, And gold has gone through its most parabolic move, possibly in history, especially in terms of market cap. Up here was a $40 trillion asset. Now it's about $30 trillion. So that's freeing up liquidity for other things to do well. Personally, I'd rather invest in something that shows strength, like Bitcoin has overall, but is relatively cheap versus something that has just gone through a parabolic top. So another confluence is that if you ask ordinary people what to invest in, they will probably tell you the wrong thing. So like when he was telling me, oh, hey, gold is a good investment that's January, where's February? Yeah, around here, right? That's probably the least good time to invest in that thing. You know what I mean? So anyways, let's go over some other charts here. There's a couple more things I want to say. I went over the stablecoin market cap. I went over stablecoin dominance. That's just a plain others chart. I went over copper to gold. I went over ISM. I went over the fact that others is probably near the bottom of its Bollinger Band, and the previous times where we've seen that, we've had massive explosion, right? A touch here, massive explosion. Near the bottom here, massive explosion. We've actually had a touch, a near touch, and we're still pretty close to the bottom of this Bollinger Band. Probably next, an explosion to the upside. Let's go over some individual altcoins. So I'm going to pick out some ones that I haven't talked about yet, but I'm a pretty big fan of. I feel like they are at pretty good discounts, and I feel like they have some serious upside potential. So let's go ahead and talk about SUI. So SUI is a coin that is very undervalued. It is near its all-time lows. It's a little bit over the zero level fib. I think this is a fantastic buy considering the strength that it's had throughout this prior cycle. So you can look at, even in 2020, December of 24, we did have a mini bull run altcoin season, shall I say. It's still fairly new, it's still fairly hot, and it's extremely undervalued. So in this case, could SUI drop down to the zero level fib? That's entirely possible. But I feel like, excuse me, I'm choking a little bit. I feel like SUI has a very long way to go, especially considering that we haven't had any sort of altcoin season, especially when we look at others, right? It's just been sideways and down movement for months on end. So SUI, to me, it looks pretty good. Let's take a look at some other factors here. So one of the things I mentioned is that I don't like it when a circulating supply is a lot lower than the total supply. With that being said, if token unlocks are done reasonably and they're done slowly, it could be a coin that's worth investing in. So let's take a look at the token unlocks. So you can see here they're kind of going up very slowly over time. And even by 2030, you only have a 3.66 billion unlocked market cap. You only have 47% of the market cap unlocked, and it's currently around 40%. So to me, SUI looks like it's holding support. It's shown strength. It has reasonable token unlocks. And I think SUI could be a serious gainer and serious outperformer in this market. Let's take a look at another one. So we have Chainlink here, and I have both a Bollinger Band, and I also have a fib retracement from its 2024 December high. And you can see here it's just kind of hanging out around its zero level fib. Could it go down a bit more and challenge this lower Bollinger Band? It could. It's possible. So for example, we have a touch over here. We don't have really any other touches historically, right? But anytime it did, it either continued sideways or it went up. So we had a touch over here. We've kind of had sideways movement. Probabilistically, Chainlink is going to go up, and it's going to challenge this upper Bollinger Band, and it's probably going to surpass it. And it's probably going to surpass it even more than this current Bollinger Band, because as price expands upwards, this band also turns upwards, right? So something like 36, 40, 44, all-time high, very possible from this area. And let's take a look at Chainlink circulating supply and some other factors to see if it might be a good coin to investing in. So if we look at the, what am I on here? Am I on log or linear? I'm on linear. We're in a discount zone. If we go on log, we can see here that we're up and to the right. So up and to the right on log proves that there's strength. And linear possibly gives us a good entry. It's fairly cheap compared to periods of upward movement, right? So if we were to go down, I can't see token unlocks of this thing. When you can't do that, you can do a couple of things. You can look at the white paper, or we can simply compare market cap to price. So let's see what we see. Pretty similar. There are some periods of inflation, but overall, not a bad coin to invest in, especially if you're on the safer side of things. Then finally, we have Pengu. If you didn't know, penguins are my favorite animal, so I enjoy Pengu. And one of the things that I really like about Pengu right now is look at how tight its Bollinger Band is. So the tighter the Bollinger Band gets when you get 2 standard deviations away from the simple moving average, the 2 standard deviations below, the 2 above, the more likely it is that you're going to see a massive explosion. Let's look at the last time Pengu got a Bollinger Band slightly this tight, and not even as tight as it is now. We had a massive explosion to the upside. Let's see what it was. Info line, let's go from here. And I don't have to get it perfect, that's okay. 440% explosion over 35 days. We're even tighter now. And even in this time, it wasn't even at the simple moving average, and we're slightly below it at this point. So could it be the case that Pengu might make an explosion? It's very possible. Let's take a look at token unlocks and log scaling and things of that nature. So on a log scale, is it up and to the right? I mean, sort of, right? From its inception, from this low right here to now, it's kind of up and to the right. It's very volatile. But are we at a discount? Yeah, of course. We have most of our total supply unlocked, about 6 billion out of 7 billion coins, right? The other day was 6-7 day. So I like to say that here and there. So I think that's worth noting. So we have opportunity for a pretty big explosion, and I believe Fartcoin has a pretty similar looking chart. Finally, one more thing, and I wanted to do something with this others chart that I think got erased earlier, but I think it's worth investigating. So if we look at a relative high, or when downward movement started, to the bottom, if I can get it right, 547 days. If we take a look at this top and this bottom, $577, or actually if I were to shift that, no, actually that's incorrect. Let me get rid of this. So we know that we have 547 here. Hold on. I found this so amazing earlier. So let's remove this. So we know top, relative top to bottom here, 547. Let's look at this. Let's look at this. 547. Let me get the other one just to show you. If I can nail it. It's hard to move the cursor, sorry. $547. That's going to be my screenshot down there. We witnessed 547 days of downward movement in the 2021 cycle, and we have just gotten 547 days of downward movement. What comes next? You tell me. Guys, that's it for me. Like and subscribe if you like the information. It means a lot. I'm a small channel. Trying my best. New to this type of thing. So, yeah, if you like it, feel free to check me out. Feel free to leave some comments. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.